Hello, everyone, and welcome back. And I purposefully did not put up a video or any writing assignments last week because they told us that the days that were called off for snow, which was pretty much Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that those days we were not to do online courses either, which was very confusing for me, but I just didn't want to overwhelm you or, have you all sort of trying to say, hey, Dudash, we're supposed to be able to catch up or do something else right now. You're not supposed to be assigning new stuff. So even though the reading schedule is as it is, and I'm probably just going to leave it where it is, but we will catch up as we go. So please don't concern yourself too much with that sort of technical part of the scheduling, but do, a little more reading if you didn't do any at all, or if you did it once, maybe you need to do it again. After tonight's lecture, I'm hoping that if you have started reading the assignments from last week and you finished them or you're mostly through them, that this video will help you in sort of organizing and understanding what you read. And if you haven't touched it yet, or you just started a little bit of it, or you sort of glazed over when you started reading it, which happens to me a lot, and you just decided I can't do this right now, you went ahead and put it down and you have not read it, that's okay. This will be sort of your introduction to it, and hopefully it will help you when you do get the chance to sit down and actually read these texts. One thing I'm going to get out of the way that's a distraction right now before anything else, because it is driving me nuts, and that is that I think I announced that I had a tooth emergency last Sunday, not this past Sunday, but the previous, and it required oral surgery on Monday morning, and it required them removing a tooth, and it's very close to the front, and we have to put a replacement in, and that takes months of various different stages. And so if as you're watching me, you're like, is she missing a tooth? And you hyper focus on that, the answer is yes. Yes, I am. And it will be fixed someday in the next 6 months or so, I'm hoping. And I just kind of have to live with it. I have a little bit of a lisp, but more importantly, when I'm talking, if I smile or open my mouth, even just, in a little bit, you could kind of see it. So I apologize. Hopefully now that we've acknowledged that elephant in the room, it won't bother you nearly as much over the course of the next several minutes as I talk to you about a large piece of reading. And in a way, those snow days were a blessing, because understanding Plato and Aristotle is not easy, just themselves, right? But comparing them and reading them back to back, that may be even more confusing. So what I'm hoping to do in this video is to explain to you what arguments Plato is making and what arguments Aristotle is making about the role of rhetoric and philosophy in our everyday lives. And that's sort of where we're going to start this discussion. And as we go through it, I'm going to hopefully be able to delineate for you clearly the difference between the two and why they are the way that they are, and what that means for us as we begin this sort of track into what we are addressing now as theory, okay? Because Gorgias's work on the Enchonium, Isocrates' work on Against the Sophists, those were practical speeches. They were things that we could look at as pieces of rhetoric, really more than anything else. But week 3, which was last week, week 3 was really where we start talking about the theory around what rhetoric is and what it should and should not do, and sort of the ethics of it. All right, so that's where we're going to go. In keeping with the order of your book, but more importantly with the timeline of rhetoric, I want to start with Plato. I had you read, I believe I only had you read Phaedrus. Now, the name Phaedrus is the title of the work because the student Phaedrus is talking to his teacher, who is named Socrates in this particular piece. Now, oftentimes when Plato or Aristotle or others wrote these sort of dialogic pieces, they would find a voice for themselves, like the wise person or the person who's going to be right in the end, and name them Socrates after the great educator. Okay, so the great philosopher. So that's why you see that Socrates is sort of a generic nom de plume for anybody who is acting in the role of teacher or in the role of philosopher at that point in time. And Phaedrus is his student. And so this is a conversation between Socrates and Phaedrus. Now, the voice of Plato is 100% seen in Socrates. And Phaedrus sort of represents every other person, all of us, the people that would be studying rhetoric, particularly that we might be studying rhetoric with Plato if we had that opportunity. And their topic of conversation is fascinating, right? Their topic of conversation is about whether you should learn from someone that you're in love with, or whether you should learn and live with someone who you don't have any romantic feelings for at all whatsoever. You don't love them. And it's interesting that they're having this conversation, but the reason they're having it is probably multi-leveled. You know, I don't know. You guys in your TV shows that you watch, I imagine, are doing the same thing that the TV shows that I'm watching are doing, which is it's all about going meta or subtext or crossing over sort of what you're supposed to be reading with or hearing within the context of the television show that you're watching. Look at this the same way. Plato was interested in Phaedrus as a lover. And he knew that his student, because at the time, students followed their teachers around and they were constantly with them and constantly learning. So, Socrates or Plato sort of takes on the role of Socrates to not just be the voice of the philosopher and the person who's going to be right in the end, but also as the person who would be seen as powerful and as a potential love interest for young students at the time. Okay, so that's sort of one layer. Another layer is that they are talking about a piece of rhetoric that is delivered, a speech that is delivered by Lysias. Now, Lysias is a character. He's a good rhetorician. He's a great speaker. What did rhetoricians do in those days aside from teach? As you know, there was no mass media. There was no writing things down. There was no newspaper, radio, etc. There were there was only one channel, if you want to look at it that way. And that was that, like Lysias in this case, gives a speech. And there are people there, designated citizens there, to go to their villages and repeat the message. Now, I want to make a really important note here. Repeating the message and delivering the message with the intent that it was supposed to have has absolutely nothing to do with memorizing the speech. It's about how they were able to take what was in the speech, filter it through what they need to do for the audience that they're delivering the message to, and then they deliver the speech. So when we talk about the 5 canons of rhetoric, and one of them is memoria or memory, we are not talking about memorizing a piece of rhetoric. We are talking about being able to sort of funnel out what the core messages are and deliver them to our audience in a way that they will understand. All right? So Lysias is the one giving this speech in, I want to say it was Athens, wherever they were at the time in Greece. And he took that, and he wasn't a rhetorician. He did not go to other villages and deliver the speech. But he did listen to it because he really liked listening to Lysias. In fact, he seemed to almost admire Lysias in the same way that Plato wanted to be admired by Phaedrus. So there's sort of an interesting jealous subtext going on here, which is fun to play with when you're talking about this particular topic. So Lysias delivers this speech. Phaedrus takes it back to Socrates and says, I have to tell you about this speech that I just heard. Lysias just did this fantastic speech about why you should study from someone you love or from someone that you don't love. And Socrates, in this case, Plato, the voice of Plato, Socrates says, okay, go ahead, tell me about it. I'm sure it's no better than anything else anybody else could do. I told you not to go waste your time listening to these rhetoricians, but I'll listen. And so Phaedrus repeats the speech, or tries to. I think that Socrates interrupts him constantly and stops him very early in and says, okay, let me see if I got this right. And from that point on, you hear the speech or the main points of the speech multiple times. I believe it's 2.5 times, if my memory serves. 2.5 more times that you listen to Plato deliver the speech, and he takes it and delivers it in different ways to prove that rhetoric was not philosophy. It wasn't the study of life. It wasn't a science. It didn't come out of reasoning, but instead that you could take it and do whatever you want with it. So at one point you see him saying that you should be learning from a lover. Another time you see you should not be learning from a lover. And then the last time we get these sort of, I think it's the last time, we get these sort of rules about why rhetoric is bad. So that's the way I'm going to take this particular work to talk about it. All right. So the first question is, what do I mean when I say it's not philosophy? It's not science. It's not reasoning. That sounds completely counterintuitive. Of course it does, because let me just make this perfectly clear. All right. Plato did not like rhetoric. In fact, he hated it. He thought it was damaging, unethical. You'll hear more of those reasons in a little bit here, but he really did not like rhetoric. So every time you're reading this piece, if you see Socrates say something in this piece, that is Plato, and his main goal is to teach you a lesson about why rhetoric is not good. What's the distinction between that and philosophy or reasoning? Philosophy for Plato comes from a place called dialectic, not dialectical. I think I've mentioned this in a previous lecture briefly, but dialectic, right? Where two equal opposing ideas come together and create a point of stasis, whereby there must be, according to Aristotle, a decision made, and where rhetoric begins. Whereas Plato would tell you that it stops right here. You get to stasis and you're done, because the philosopher tells you what the right choice is. So if you think about this in like more common terms or more current terms, Plato believed in sort of a monarchy, to be honest with you. Definitely a hierarchy of some kind, and definitely sort of autocratic. Okay. He did not believe in democracy at all whatsoever, whereas Aristotle did. In this case, rhetoric, where you make that choice between those two opposing ideas at the point of stasis, rhetoric is necessary when you have a democracy, because it's necessary when the power of the government is dispersed among the many. So no, it's not perfect, by the way. I don't want to give that idea at all whatsoever, but the idea that multiple people participate in their government, in the creation of their society, is democracy. So Plato, he didn't like democracy, so he didn't see why rhetoric was important. That point of stasis and philosophy literally meaning the study of life. So that at this time, that's a science. The study of life is a science. Dialectics is the process, or dialectic, I should say, is the process that Plato went through to come to his conclusions. And it's dialogic in that it's a dialogue between two things. You've got these two equally powerful or equally weighted ideas pushing against each other. The philosopher goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and the good philosopher is able to take that, come to a conclusion between those two things, and then tell the people this is what is right or true. Scientifically, we came to that conclusion in a way. This goes along with Plato's idea of the philosopher king. He believed that there should be one person in charge because it's ludicrous to think that more than one person could help rule any society. And so the philosopher king is appointed. Basically, Plato says he would be the philosopher king. I don't know what happens after he dies, but he was it. He was the philosopher king. He knew what was right. He knew what was wrong. He was the only one who could tell you these things. All right. That's where dialectic takes us. It takes us to one person choosing between two things. It takes us to a process of going back and forth between two ideas in order to come up with the conclusion and choose between the two. Rhetoric, according to Aristotle, comes in at that point of stasis and sort of sweeps it up and says, okay, let's make a choice and let's explain the reasoning behind that choice, the philosophy behind that choice, the dialectic behind that choice. All right. So according to Aristotle, dialectic is the counterpart to rhetoric, and rhetoric is the counterpart to dialectic. For Plato, rhetoric is evil and philosophy is great. And that's that, which again is why he appreciates the philosopher king monarchical power structure of society, which Aristotle does not agree with. So Plato's school was called the Academy. It's the original, academy. It's where all of our words come from. When we talk about academics or the academy or academe or academia or any of those, obviously from the original, what is it that I'm supposed to say? The goat of philosophy and academia and education. He is the original. So he taught Aristotle for some time. And so Aristotle got a lot of his ideas from Plato. Plato said dialectic is the only thing that matters and rhetoric's evil. And Aristotle said, wait, no. Dialectic and rhetoric have to go together. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, just because you figured out an answer doesn't mean that it's the answer. So this idea of public discourse comes from Aristotle. So let's focus on Plato. We know that he prefers philosophy and dialectic over rhetoric. He thinks rhetoric is bad. We're going to get to those reasons. And he's having this conversation with Lysias about what Phaedrus did. And if you read the undertones a little bit, you can kind of see that jealousy I was talking about. And so Socrates, in this case, is not just trying to convince Phaedrus that rhetoric is bad, but he's also trying to convince Phaedrus that he is better than Lysias at everything, which is kind of funny if you think about it. Okay, so how do they do that? They go through this 2.5 times and it's a debate essentially where Plato has to win. That would be Socrates has to win. Because this is being written by Plato, you know that from the get-go that Socrates is going to win. And here's how much respect I have for this idea. I've got 4 lizards, right? I've got 4 leopard geckos and I have 1 betta fish. And I know we think that the leopard geckos are stupid, and they are derpy creatures. Fish are worse. Like, what do you do? So I named the fish Socrates because that's sort of how I feel, is that Socrates was just like swimming in his own bowl, did not know there was anybody else around, did not care, was more interested in his own ideas. Now, that's actually not Socrates. The original Socrates, who's not just known through other people's works, I don't believe was like that. He, in fact, was put to death because he was, what was it they said? Corrupting the minds of the youth, which we will hear again, by the way. So Socrates may have, sort of thought that, great, you think I'm the smartest person in the room. That's fantastic. But no, Plato, that's not where I would go with this. Socrates was much more about educating more people, not fewer people, whereas Plato thought, look, most of these people don't need to know anything except what we tell them. Okay? So why is rhetoric bad? When we read this piece and we're watching them go back and forth, and yes, your head will spin. You will say, well, I don't understand this one passage, it will drive you crazy. Don't focus on that one passage. Focus on the general argument that's being made. What is it that rhetoric does that is so bad? Now, the way that it's presented, Plato presents it as if Socrates is saying, here's the things that rhetoric can do, and isn't that fantastic? In that piece of it, he is not trying to say that rhetoric is good. He is saying the reason rhetoric is bad is because it does all these things. So what are those things? Well, one of them is that it can hide or distort the truth. So one of the first problems on once we start reading about rhetoric, one of the first problems is that Plato believes firmly that rhetoric distorts the truth. It doesn't reflect the truth. It doesn't represent the truth. It doesn't duplicate the truth. It is far removed from the truth. How does he get there? Well, not in this work, but in other works that Plato has done that I do not require you to read. You're welcome. He talks about the idea that we are all sort of, it's called his cave allegory. You may have heard of it before, where we are all sitting chained to the floor, looking ahead at the wall, the back wall of a cave. And in between our back and outside of the cave is a fire. And there are people out there who have seen the world, very few, who have seen the world, and they are representing the world to us by making shadows on the cave wall. So the knowledge that we receive is minuscule compared to the knowledge that they have. And who are they? Well, they're the philosophers. They're the philosopher kings, right? Which brings us to Plato's other theory of the ideal, of ideal forms is what he calls it. He says that there was some point in our existence, and none of us know when or how this happens, and neither does he. He doesn't explain, but he calls it the noumenal world. That's Noumenal. I think I got that right. The noumenal world is this place where we experience the perfect form of everything. The ideal form of everything. The ideal form of love, the ideal form of beauty, the ideal form of chairs, the ideal form of beds. I don't know. I don't know how far this goes. He was mainly talking about philosophical concepts, but it's a lot easier if we put it into the concrete, right? The ideal form for me in a partner would have been Keanu Reeves, but I think everybody kind of feels that way. He's such a good guy, right? But that's certainly not who I am going to be working with here on Earth, right? I have to take a less than form of the ideal. And that's true for everything that we do. Less than this chair, it's all right, it's great, but it's probably not ideal. I don't know that we can ever achieve the ideal. This is also, by the way, not just ideal forms, but this is where truth exists. So everything that we do on Earth is an attempt to get at these ideals. And most of the time we fail. In fact, all the time we fail. We don't get that close even. They are bastardized versions of the ideal forms. They are mutated and changed, and they're unfortunate in their function. Okay. Obviously, a lot of us might feel this way about love anyway. Love is not perfect ever, right? There's no ideal love that we really can experience on Earth. And Plato says that this is because we cannot achieve those ideals. We can only strive for them. Fab. All right, I'm down with that. I can get that. I understand that everything that we have is not the ideal of what we should have or what we could have. It's only getting us close. Of course, the chairs in Craig Hall, nowhere near the ideal, right? So classroom chairs are by far from the ideal. But this becomes important if the truth is the ideal. And what we experience on earth is some bastardized or mutated version of that ideal. Then what happens when we start talking about that ideal? Well, we're talking about the bastardization of an ideal that we think we know. That's an extra step further away from the truth. If you can kind of see that the ideal lives here and the bastardized version that we deal with is right here, so talking about it is over here, it's another step further away from the truth. And that's what allows rhetoric to interject itself and change truth and change meaning. All right? Hopefully that's clear. Let me know about the questions on the discussion board. I'm going to put a question up about this particular thing, okay? Because I think it's a fruitful discussion. Another reason why rhetoric is bad is because it can persuade people to do things for all the wrong reasons, right? You can totally use rhetoric to persuade people of one thing that's not true because it's not close to the ideal. And they're going to go around thinking they're doing the ideal, but they're not because they've been tricked by rhetoric. So rhetoric is tricky. Rhetoric, a third problem is that rhetoric can show something as good and bad at the exact same time. Now, I got to be honest with you. It's not like this is a new argument, right? I mean, we say this about politicians all the time. Oh, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths, or their left hand doesn't know what their right hand is doing, or you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Like all these different cultural references that we have to go along with this idea that people can kind of play with what the actual truth is. We definitely blame salesmen for doing this. We definitely accuse politicians of doing this. Any public figure, for the most part, we will accuse of playing with the truth a little bit to say something that is politically, strategically worded so that you agree with the speaker, even if you actually don't. You're going to be tricked because you are not smart enough to understand how to sort out the truth, pull out the truth from rhetoric that you don't have to deal with if you're just practicing dialectic or philosophy. He's not wrong. I mean, he's not wrong. Aristotle will tell you that any rhetoric that is practiced without the truth, if you're lying and you're saying you're practicing rhetoric, you're not practicing rhetoric. He says the very definition of rhetoric includes an ethic, a responsibility to only share the truth. That gets a little shaky with Plato, obviously. A fourth reason that rhetoric is bad, according to Plato, is that it can also make people feel like they have a freedom of decision-making or a knowledge or a control over their destinies that they don't have. And he felt that was dangerous. And if you think about it, if I go and I get educated on something, I then come and share that with you guys, or next year's class, or 10 years ago, that class. I mean, take your pick, right? You trust that what I'm telling you is the truth. And to be honest with you, well, I have read these books. I'm also trusting that my teachers told me the truth about how to interpret this, right? We sort of have to, whenever you are in an audience of any kind, you're watching a TV commercial, or you're at a speech, or you're at a town hall, whatever. Anytime that you are in that world, there is a good chance you're not going to understand what you're being told. I think Plato thought we were all stupid. I think that's a fair way to put it. I mean, considering he thought he was the only true philosopher king. Okay, I mean, we kind of need more than that, Plato, but thank you. Thank you for playing. So, how does that conclude? Well, it concludes with Lysias saying, okay, not only have you convinced me that what Lysias said was true, but you've also convinced me that rhetoric is bad. And I mean, that's an interesting way to come to the conclusion of that, but Lysias is not the one who ends this debate, if you will, or this conversation, if you will, because remember, Plato has to win. It is Plato's interpretation that we're getting here through the lens of Socrates. Mini intermission. Give my throat a quick rest. Plato is not easy to understand, but what I want you to get out of him is what I just told you. Look for those things in the book, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that moves us to Aristotle. And I mean, it's great to philosophize or theorize or guess or share ideas about what we believe rhetoric is. And it's easy to say, oh, it's a negative thing. It's terrible. Why are you teaching people how to lie? Well, that's not what I'm doing, but okay, thank you for that. Why are you teaching people how to talk like politicians, to hide the truth, to lie, to mutate the truth or change it in some way? Or more to hide the truth completely and get them onto some other idea. It is hard to argue with that, except that Aristotle comes along and says, whoa, wait, dude. First of all, if you educate citizens, they'll be able to critically think about what messages they're receiving. They will be smart enough to be able to determine what is true and what is not. And I'm not going to lie to you. Right now, in our current world, I don't know if this is true anymore. But supposedly, if you study rhetoric, you're able to distinguish between what is truth and what is not when you see it. And if you are listening to a true rhetorician, they are telling you the truth. Okay, we can hope that Aristotle is right, but I got into a huge debate with a friend of mine who I have not seen in over 30 years. Like, that is no joke. It's been over 30 years. We met once. It was in New York City at it was a national student congress competition that we were at, and we were in the same house. And his dad was the editor for Time magazine, and he lived on Central Park West and in a penthouse. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is such a weird world that we live in, that I'm talking to this guy. It was just sort of a weird exchange. And then we started writing letters to each other over the course of several years. And of course, Facebook came along. And so all you have to do is Google their name or search their name on Facebook, and voila, you've got them. Anyway, he and I still engage on Facebook. And what we say to each other every year for our birthdays is, happy birthday to my favorite sparring partner. He is almost completely the opposite of me in politics. That's irrelevant to you. I respect him greatly as a human being. I respect his opinion. I know it comes from a place of knowledge on his part and on my part. We just disagree on how we get to a certain point in time. But he is in Australia. So if you can imagine a New York accent with 20 years of Australia living on top of that, you have James. And so I listened to him and I'm like, dude, your accent is messed up. Your way of speaking is messed up. He works for Sky News. So it's not like he's not working for an international news company. He is. So he works for Sky News and he does a lot of the political commentary. He can comment obviously on Australia and on the United States and the relationship between the two. And so he's pretty well liked among his audiences. Great. We disagree 100%. We got into a debate the other day because he had to post on Facebook, which I knew was coming. Keep in mind, we're Gen Xers, so we're using Facebook still. Sorry. We'll catch up, but give us time. He posts that he doesn't understand why all these people are leaving Spotify because of the Joe Rogan experience. And I happen to be one of those people that left. My husband was the one who initiated that conversation. I am not really, I could care less either way. I couldn't care less either way. And I don't know, like people say that Joe Rogan is giving out misinformation that's medical. Do I think that's a problem? Yes. What does that mean for me? I don't listen to Joe Rogan, right? I mean, sorry, I liked him when he did that Fear Factor thing or whatever it was that he did many, many moons ago. But I never have listened to him. So I've seen clips, but I really just don't care about what he has to say. I don't happen to think that celebrities or popularity makes you a medical doctor. And I'm not going to take my advice from you just because you say it's the right thing, right? We need to think about where we're getting our messages. But my husband said to me, I wasn't really too concerned about this. I wasn't going to do anything until I saw that Joni Mitchell decided to, I'm sorry, my slipper fell off, that Joni Mitchell decided to take her music off of Spotify. So what should we do? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I said, I don't care. We can switch. I can get all my podcasts elsewhere, which is what I mainly use Spotify for. And I said, or I can get my albums like Hamilton and Venom and my classical music off of any other service. So we looked into it. We settled on Amazon Music. It's the same price as Spotify. Canceled Spotify, picked up Amazon Music, and we're both fine with that. But James just irked me because he said, so you left because of Joe Rogan? And the answer is no. I mean, not for me. Here's the way I see it. Every company, be they media or merchandise or anything else, services of some kind, any of them, any company that's big is going to make decisions that you don't like. Spotify comes out of, I believe it's Sweden. They have different rules over there and different ideas. For example, they happen to think that free speech is legitimately an inalienable right that no one can take away from you. And if you're too dumb to know the difference between when somebody's lying to you or playing with you or messing with you and giving you misinformation and when they're telling you the things you need to know, that's on you. But see, here in America, we like to say that we understand what you should be listening to and what you shouldn't be listening to. And if you think about this from a libertarian point of view, the idea that the right to free speech is 100% protected, you can never touch it, you can never infringe upon it, then I hope you don't go into anywhere in public because it's infringed on all the time. Be that through strict rules like you can't yell fire in a movie theater, all the way to hate speech. Okay, so there are regulations. Let's just start there. And the second thing is these companies are not small. They will not care if they're not getting my $15 every month because they're going to get $15 from the millions of other people that use their service, and that's what's important. Joe Rogan is not going to make or break Spotify. I hate to say it, but it's true. But here I am, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's fine. Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, like some of my dad's favorite music, they're pulling their stuff off the shelf. Okay. But I got engaged in this conversation and he kept saying, but it's silly, right? It's silly to get rid of Spotify just because you can't turn off Joe Rogan, right? I mean, it's not like it's aggressively coming at you. You'd have to search it out and actually follow the podcast and then get the information right that way. And it has to be the only thing you're listening to, let's be honest, for it to be really detrimental. And I said, well, no, but this is capitalism, right? Like the last time I checked, we live in a capitalistic democracy for the most part. I mean, there's a few communistic ideas in there in our economy, but for the most part, it's a capitalistic government. Certainly, Spotify is a capitalistic. It's a business. It's capitalistic by nature. It's trying to make money. By the way, I heard that what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg lost $32 billion today. And I'm just like, my head explodes. I don't even know how much that is. How do you have so much money that you could just lose 32 billion overnight? My mind was blown. But that's what we're talking about. So yeah, they don't care if my $15 doesn't come in every month. Spotify follows a different ideal. They think that they should make everything available that they can make available. They give a platform to anybody who wants it, and you could choose not to listen to it. And that is still the deal here. I don't think that sending them $15 a month is supporting Joe Rogan either. I mean, maybe if a nickel of mine went to Joe Rogan over the past 10 years I've been listening to Spotify, okay. Do I like that? No, but does it make a difference? Not at all. Not to anybody, actually. But what if I was able to impact things with my money by saying, I just cannot listen to Joe Rogan. That's fine. Leave your service up. I'm not telling anybody to fire him, to leave Spotify, whatever. Do what you will. But with my money, I can say for me and my household that we are going to go to a different service because we're not real cool with the idea of health information being put out there that is ultimately, listen to carefully what I say, communitarian. Communitarian and communism are not the same things. Communitarian means that you think about the community or the health of the community or the general well-being of the community over the individual's rights. So for many years in Oklahoma, for example, pornography was banned. You could not drive from Texas to Missouri and have pornography in your car. You're violating the law. That's because the state of Oklahoma decided as a community that pornography was way too damaging, and they slashed that right. It's the same thing here. I happen to think that I don't want to support this platform right now because of what they're doing. I've been supporting this platform for over 10 years, I think. Okay, so what do? Well, you do what you do in capitalism. You go to another service. You go to another store. You buy what you want over here instead of over here. That's capitalism. I had somebody complaining to me the one day that Bass Pro and what's the other one that they own? They own another big. They just bought, not just, but just in the last few years. Is it Gander Mountain or one of those? Anyway, it's one of those other ones. And so in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where either you're a hunter or you're not. So either you have knowledge or you have zero knowledge and you're fearful of it, right? Like it's a very black and white issue up there. Unlike down here where it's a little bit more sane. But up there, they're like, do you know that I have to go into Bass Pro and then go across the street to the other store, whatever it is, Gander Mountain or whatever. I have to go across the street to the other one because what's on sale in this store is not on sale in this store. And what's on sale in this store is not on sale in this store. And I'm like, it's called capitalism. That's how they make the most money. If you want to run between the stores trying to save an extra $1.80 on your, hundreds of dollars, you go right ahead. I don't happen to be that picky. So I guess I can afford to not be that picky is sort of what I'm saying. And that's another key to capitalism. Now, what's important here is today we cannot separate our economy from our governmental system. Our ruling system and governing system is exactly the same as our economic system. Why? Hate to tell you, it was Alexander Hamilton's fault. It's literally all Alexander Hamilton. And quite frankly, I'm glad he did it. But, Thomas Jefferson, my uncle, and a lot of other people would tell you that was the dumbest thing that ever happened to America. And I'm like, well, seeing as we're still here, I'm going to run with it was an okay thing to do. They are so tied together that whenever we say something economic related, people think it's political. right? And so the first thing James does is has outrage about the economy and the economics behind this Joe Rogan Spotify fiasco. And I'm like responding to that. And then it turns political because that's what people do. So keep in mind that at the time of Aristotle, that was not the case. Okay. Why did I tell you all of that? Well, I tell you all of that because, first of all, I want you to understand that rhetoric is in your everyday life, be it on Insta, be it on TikTok, be it on any other platform, social media or otherwise, television, movies, etc. All of them are a practice in rhetoric. They're attempting to persuade you about something. And when we're talking about those types of mass media channels, we're talking about mass influence. And I told you, rhetoric's about mass influence. It's not about one-on-one, right? Aristotle wants us to understand that rhetoric is occurring all the time around us. And we can say we hate it. Fine, but you can't ignore it. Because if you ignore it, then you're not going to be able to have the skill or art of knowing in any particular instance all the means of persuasion. Remember, I told you that that definition is on every single one of my tests. It's true. It is. The art or skill of knowing in any instance all of the means of persuasion that are being engaged so that you can choose what you want to believe to be true and what you want to ignore. Make sense? I'm asking a camera if it makes sense. I really miss being in the classroom with y'all. So how does Aristotle, so what does Aristotle do? He says, I'm going to take theory and I'm going to teach it as a practice. So the first thing we have to understand is that dialectic and rhetoric have to go together. You cannot give a speech about something and not have gone through the process of finding out what's true and what's not true. If you do that, you're not practicing rhetoric. You're just lying or making crap up. Okay? So the first thing he says is that these two go hand in hand. Because if you want to understand all the means of persuasion, then you have to understand the types of arguments that people are going to be making and the types of evidence that people are going to be using and the types of reasoning that they use to get from that data to our claim for our argument. All right. It's in between our data, our evidence, and our claim where the warrant lives. The warrant is this reasoning between how the data gets us to the claim. Our job as rhetoricians is to understand how that happens and whether or not it works and to be able to evaluate whether or not that makes sense. All right. So that's where we're headed as we go through, this entire semester, to be honest with you. We're going to get there pretty quick. But for Aristotle, we need to understand that he was attempting to establish his school, the Lyceum. He was attempting to establish it as different from Plato's. And there were people, for example, Alexander the Great. His parents really wanted him to study under Aristotle. And he's called Alexander the Great for a reason. Like, he had a great reign. He was very powerful for the time that he was in. But that he was trained by Aristotle, not by Socrates, not by Plato, but by Aristotle. Because Aristotle showed us how our everyday lives are impacted by the art of knowing, in any particular instance, all the means of persuasion. All right. So in the next video, which I'm going to actually stop now and start a new one tomorrow because my tongue just is hurting. If you've ever had a tooth pulled, you'll understand this. It's a different experience and your tongue doesn't get used to it. I'm still in pain and I hope you will forgive me for stopping here for now. So tomorrow I will record another video where we go into the very specific rules and regulations of rhetoric according to Aristotle. We will be looking at reasoning and types of reasoning, proofs, what proofs are, how they work in an argument, and what the types are. We will be looking at the three genres of rhetoric as Aristotle describes them. When it's appropriate to use rhetoric is another way of saying that. We will go into a lot of the basic rules of rhetoric. I am not going to get into the topics or topoi. I don't know how your book has it listed. In fact, I believe, unless I'm completely mistaken, I believe that I put on your syllabus that, I have read the rhetoric. So I think what happened is the book gave you a very slim, edited down version of probably books 1, 2, and 3. And that's what you're going to be reading. So you don't have to read all of it in the sense of we're not giving you the whole book and saying, here, go read it. Instead, they edited down what we're going to have you read so that you're not completely overwhelmed. You're probably going to be overwhelmed anyway, but the good news is that number one, this is not written in dialogue form. And number two, it has subheadings, so you'll be able to at least follow the organizational pattern along. All right, any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or threats, send them on to me through the email. Actually, you know what? Don't send threats because that could probably get you in some trouble. It's the way I say that. I don't know where I got that from. It's the way I've been ending my courses for the past 15 years. So let me know if you need anything. And of course, always feel free to text or call. And we will get through this. And I hope you enjoyed the downtime last week. I hope you took some downtime last week. We're all overworked and overstressed and in a very, very weird period in history right now. So you take care of you, and we will talk again tomorrow.